Part 1. The sky over New Carthage Station was usually bright with the comings and goings of 100 different species. Ships from the Velnari, sleek and silver like polished bone, drifted beside the blocky freighters of the Cathari. Smaller couriers zipped between docking arms, their pilots chattering in half a dozen languages over open channels. But today the station was quiet. Not empty. There were still aliens moving through the corridors. But the hum of human life was gone. It had been 3 days since the last human ship undocked. 3 days since the final group of Earth-born citizens boarded the transport Aurora and vanished into the dark between stars. They left no message, no protest, no farewell broadcast. Just silence. Daniel Brooks stood near the observation deck, hands in his pockets, watching a Cathari maintenance drone drift past the viewport. He wore simple gray coveralls, no rank insignia, no official badge. He hadn't worn one since the vote. The Galactic Concord Council had declared humanity non-compliant after the incident on Viridian 4, a skirmish they didn't start, a treaty they didn't break. But the evidence had been twisted, the testimonies ignored. The Velnari, who valued order above all, saw human unpredictability as a threat. The Cathari, who prized efficiency, saw emotion as a flaw. Together they convinced the rest of the council. Exile was the only solution. Humans were given 1 solar cycle to leave all conquered space. No appeals. No delays. Most species would have fought. Some would have begged. Others might have launched a desperate, doomed rebellion. But humans did none of those things. Instead, they packed. Quietly. Carefully. With the same calm focus they used to build cities on Mars or repair warp cores in zero gravity. Maya Ruiz had been the one to coordinate the withdrawal. A former fleet liaison, she now worked without a uniform, moving between colonies and outposts with a small team of volunteers. She didn't shout orders. She didn't curse the council. She simply made lists, checked manifests, and ensured every child, every elder, every pet made it onto a ship. When someone asked why they weren't fighting back, she'd just say, "We'll be heard louder by leaving than by yelling." And so they left. New Carthage had once been home to over 12,000 humans. Now their quarters stood empty. Their cafes were closed. Their workshops powered down. The only signs they'd ever been there were small: a child's drawing taped to a bulkhead, a coffee mug left on a counter, a single boot near an airlock. The conquered assumed humans would scatter, fade, maybe even die out in the void. They didn't understand that humans had been exiled before, by ice ages, by wars, by oceans, and each time they rebuilt. On the far side of the station, a Velnari inspector named Trellis floated through what used to be Human Sector Gamma. His long, pale fingers tapped at a data pad as he recorded the state of the abandoned spaces. No sabotage, he murmured to his assistant. No traps. They even left the life support systems running at minimal power. He paused at a classroom door. Inside, desks were neatly arranged. A chalkboard still held a half-erased lesson on stellar navigation. It's as if they expected someone else to use this place. His assistant, a young Cathari named Joran, frowned. Why would they care? They're gone. Trellis didn't answer. He just stared at the board, at the careful handwriting that spelled out Orion Arm Safe Routes. Something about it unsettled him. Not because it was threatening, but because it wasn't. There was no anger in those words, only help. Back on Earth, the last shuttles were lifting off from the old spaceports. Cities that once pulsed with noise and light now sat under a strange hush. In Chicago, a man named Leo Grant locked the door of his workshop for the last time. Inside, half-built fusion prototypes sat on benches, tools laid out as if waiting for hands that wouldn't return. He didn't take them. He left them for whoever might need them later. In Nairobi, Priya Sharma handed a data chip to a local botanist, a backup of her research on cross-species crop resilience. "If they come back," she said softly, "tell them we tried." The exodus wasn't just from space stations and colonies. It was from everywhere humans had touched. Research labs on Titan, mining outposts in the Kuiper Belt. Even the deep-sea habitats off the coast of Chile powered down, their residents boarding submersibles that rose to meet orbital transports. No one was left behind. Not by choice, anyway. A few chose to stay, those married to aliens, those too old to travel, but they were rare. And even they did not protest. They simply accepted their new reality with quiet dignity. The conquered watched it all from a distance. Some council members felt relief. Others unease. Ambassador Nessa Vor of the Kethari watched the final departure logs from her office on Elira. She had argued against the exile, calling it short-sighted. Now, as she reviewed footage of the Aurora slipping past the outer beacon, she felt a chill. Not fear, she wasn't prone to that, but a deep nagging doubt. What had they just lost? On board the Aurora, Daniel Brooks sat in the mess hall sipping recycled water from a plain metal cup. Around him, families huddled together, some sleeping, some whispering. Children played quietly with handmade toys. No one cried. Not anymore. The grief had passed. Now came the work. Maya Ruiz entered, her boots clicking softly on the deck. She sat across from him without a word. After a while, she said, "We're clear of conquered sensors." "No tails," he nodded. "Good." "They think we're running," she said. "We are," he replied. "But not a way forward," she smiled faintly. Outside the viewport, stars stretched endlessly in every direction. No borders, no laws, just space and possibility. Back on New Carthage, a Cathari technician tried to restart a human-designed air recycler in Sector Delta. It wouldn't boot. He called for support, frustrated. "It's just a simple unit," he complained. "Why won't it respond?" His supervisor checked the logs. "It's waiting for a voice command." Human voice, specific tone pattern. The technician sighed. Of course it is. He didn't understand that the system wasn't broken. It was just waiting for its people to come home. But they weren't coming back. Not yet, not on the Concord's terms. They had left quietly. No explosions. No speeches. No grand exits. Just a slow, steady retreat into the unknown. And in their absence, the galaxy began to notice something it had never paid attention to before. The spaces humans had filled. The problems they'd solved without being asked. The quiet hum of their presence that had held things together in ways no one realized until it was gone. The silence they left behind wasn't empty. It was full of questions. And echoes. Loud ones. 2 months passed. The stars did not change. But everything else did. On the orbital hub of Zenthus, a major Concord trade center, the air began to smell stale. At first, no one noticed. The Velnari, with their limited sense of smell, assumed it was normal. The Cathari ran diagnostics, but their systems reported all green. Yet humans had once walked these corridors, and they had kept things running in ways machines could not measure. They had tuned the microfilters by ear, adjusted airflow based on how the vents sounded, replaced worn seals before sensors flagged them. Now, without those small, constant acts of care, the station slowly decayed. A Cathari engineer named Relis finally traced the problem to the atmospheric recyclers in Sector 9. They were human-made units, installed during the last upgrade. The Concorde had kept them because they worked well, even if their design seemed messy. Wires exposed, panels labeled in handwritten script, logic that followed intuition more than code. Relis tried to run a standard reset. Nothing happened. He called for a specialist. The specialist arrived, scanned the unit, and shook his head. "It's not broken," he said. "It's just waiting." Waiting for what, no one knew. But the air kept getting worse. On the agri-moon of Corrales, crops began to wither. The soil pH shifted overnight. The automated drones sprayed nutrients, but the plants still yellowed. Human agronomists used to walk the fields barefoot, feeling the earth, tasting the leaves, talking to the plants like old friends. They'd spot trouble before instruments could. Now, without them, the system failed in slow, invisible ways. A Cathari overseer ordered more chemicals. The crops died faster, even entertainment suffered. On Elira, the capital world, citizens gathered in public plazas to watch holodramas. For years, they'd mocked human stories as too emotional, too messy. But now, with human studios gone, the new shows felt flat, predictable, safe. A young Velnari named Kira missed the human composer Eli Vance, whose music had once played in every cafe. She tried to find his archives, but much of it had been stored on human servers, now offline. All she could play was a low-quality copy of a song called Falling Up. She listened to it every night, not knowing why it made her feel both sad and hopeful. Meanwhile, far beyond conquered borders, in a quiet corner of the Perseus Arm, humans were building again. They called it the Terran Enclave. Not a nation, not a fleet, a network. Scattered habitats linked by trust and shared frequency bands. Old freighters became schools. Salvaged warships turned into hospitals. A derelict asteroid refinery now housed a research lab run by a quiet man named Leo Grant. He hadn't spoken much since leaving Earth, but his hands never stopped working. In a chamber lit only by coolant glow, he welded together pieces of scrap metal and broken circuits. What emerged was a fusion lattice unlike anything the Concorde had seen. Small, stable, and twice as efficient. He didn't patent it. He didn't sell it. He just posted the schematics on an open channel with the note, "For anyone who needs light." On another station, orbiting a nameless red dwarf, biologist Priya Sharma studied a sample under a cracked microscope. A xenovirus had broken out among a group of displaced Grelix refugees, small, furry beings with no immune defenses against off-world pathogens. The Concorde had labeled the virus incurable and quarantined the sector. But Priya remembered an old Earth technique, using engineered bacteriophages to target specific viral strains. She worked for 17 straight hours, mixing cultures, testing responses. By dawn, she had a serum. She loaded it into a drone and sent it to the Grelix camp with instructions in their language. No bill, no conditions. Just help news of this spread, not through official channels but through whispers in docking bays, coded messages in cargo manifests, stories told over shared meals on neutral stations. Humans weren't hiding. They were healing, teaching, building, and they weren't asking for anything in return. Back in conquered space, frustration grew. A Cathari trade envoy named Joran, once Trellis's assistant on New Carthage, was now stationed on the mining world of Vexus. His job was to oversee ore shipments, but half his time was spent troubleshooting systems that used to run smoothly with human oversight. One day, a coolant pipe burst in the main processing plant. Alarms blared. Robots froze, waiting for commands that made no sense in the chaos. Joran watched as a junior technician, a young Velnari, tried to reroute the flow using standard protocols. It failed, again and again. Then Joran remembered something. On New Carthage, a human engineer had once fixed a similar leak by bypassing 3 safety layers and jury-rigging a pressure valve from a coffee maker. It shouldn't have worked. But it did. He tried to explain the idea to the Velnari. The Velnari stared at him like he'd suggested setting the plant on fire. "You can't ignore safety protocols," the Velnari said. "But the system is failing," Joran replied. "Then it must be replaced, not hacked." Joran walked away, fists clenched. He didn't understand why the Concorde refused to see that sometimes rules needed bending, that life wasn't always logical. That humans had known this all along. On Elira, diplomat Nathan Cole sat in his office reviewing reports. He had once supported the exile, believing humans were too volatile for galactic unity. But now, reading about failing infrastructure, lost knowledge, and rising unrest among younger citizens, he felt doubt creep in. He pulled up an old recording, a human ambassador speaking at a Concord summit years ago. "We don't want to rule," the man had said. "We just want to belong." Nathan replayed the line 3 times. He began drafting a memo. Not to reverse the exile, that would be political suicide, but to quietly suggest that perhaps the Concord had underestimated what it lost. Out in the enclave, Maya Ruiz stood on the bridge of a refitted transport ship, watching a group of children learn navigation from an old spacer named Helen. The kids weren't using simulators. They were using star charts printed on recycled paper, tracing routes with their fingers. "See that red dot?" Helen said. "That's where we lost the Helios. But we found a better path after." The children nodded, serious and focused. They weren't being taught to win wars. They were being taught to find their way home, even if home didn't exist yet. Daniel Brooks worked in a greenhouse grown inside a hollowed-out comet. Tomatoes, wheat, and blueberries flourished under artificial suns. He watered them by hand, checking each leaf for signs of stress. A young girl named Mira helped him, her small hands careful with the soil. "Why do we grow food when we have synthesizers?" she asked. "Because real food tastes like hope," he said. She didn't understand, but she smiled anyway. The Conquered thought silence meant weakness. They thought absence meant surrender. But out here in the dark between stars, humans were not fading. They were planting seeds, not just in soil but in minds, in systems, in the hearts of those who had been forgotten. And those seeds were starting to grow. The echo of their leaving was no longer just a sound. It was a question hanging over every failing machine, every silent plaza, every empty classroom. What if we were wrong? No one had answered it yet, but the universe was listening. Part 3. Word travels slow in space, but it travels sure. It started with a freighter captain named Dax, a Cathari with a rusted hull and a debt to pay. He'd heard rumors of a human outpost near the Lyra Rift. Somewhere they fixed ships for food, not credits. Skeptical but desperate, he limped his vessel into the coordinates. What he found wasn't a military base or a hidden fortress, just a cluster of old cargo modules bolted together around a spinning habitat ring. A human woman named Helen waved him in from a comm screen, her voice calm, her eyes tired but kind. "Bring her in slow," she said. "We'll have her patched before your coffee gets cold." Dax stayed 3 days. His coolant regulator was rebuilt with parts from a broken toaster. His nav computer, glitching for months, was reset by a teenager named Mira, who hummed while she worked. When he left, they gave him extra rations and a data chip with updated safe routes through pirate zones. No invoice. No strings. Just goodwill. He told his story at the next port. Others came. A Grelk's family whose life support had failed. A Velnari scholar whose research vessel lost power near a nebula. Even a former Concord scout, dishonorably discharged seeking a place to disappear. All were helped. All were fed. All were treated like guests, not burdens. The Terran Enclave wasn't hiding. It was open. Not loud, not proud. Just there, like a light left on in a window for anyone lost in the dark. News reached the Concord faster than anyone expected. Neutral traders carried tales of human medics healing plague victims with herbs and old Earth tech. Of human teachers running floating classrooms for refugee children. Of engineers turning scrap into water purifiers, solar collectors, even small power grids for abandoned colonies. The stories spread not through official channels, but through the quiet networks of those who had nowhere else to go. On Lyra, Nathan Cole listened. He met with Joran, now transferred back to the capital after his report on Vexus went ignored. They sat in a quiet cafe far from council ears. "They're not rebuilding an empire," Joran said, stirring his drink. "They're building a home. For everyone," Cole nodded. "And we called them chaotic. They call it community." Back in the Enclave, Leo Grant stood on the outer hull of Habitat 7, tethered by a thin cord, welding a new solar array into place. Below him, the station hummed with life. Laughter from the mess hall, music from a shared speaker, the steady beep of medical monitors in the clinic. He paused, looking out at the stars. A ship approached, small, battered, flying no flag. He tapped his comm. "Maya, we've got another one. Scan shows life signs. 2 adults, 1 child," she replied. "No weapons." Sending a welcome signal. Minutes later, the airlock cycled open. A family of Sarni, tall, gray-skinned refugees whose world had been glassed by corporate miners, stepped inside, eyes wide with fear. Maya Ruiz greeted them in their language, learned from old translation logs. "You're safe here," she said. "Rest, eat, we'll talk tomorrow." She didn't ask for their past. She didn't demand loyalty. She just offered a blanket and a warm meal. That night in the common room, the Sarni father watched human children play a game with stones and string. He turned to Leo, who sat nearby mending a circuit board. "Why do you help us?" he asked. Leo didn't look up. "Because someone once helped us, and we remembered how it felt." The Sarni nodded slowly. He had heard the Concord called humans reckless. But this didn't feel reckless. It felt like the opposite of fear. Meanwhile, in the highest towers of Alira, unrest stirred. Young Velnari students gathered in plazas, playing human music on public speakers. Kethari apprentices questioned why their training ignored illogical, but effective human problem-solving methods. A petition circulated quietly at first, asking the council to review the exile decree. It gained thousands of signatures in weeks. Ambassador Nessa Vor watched it all from her office. She had tried to warn them. Now she saw the cost of pride. She requested a private meeting with Councillor Trellis, the same Velnari who had inspected New Carthage. "You were there," she said. "You saw how they left." "Did it feel like a threat?" Trellis was silent for a long time. "It felt like a warning," he finally admitted. "Not with words. With absence." On the edge of known space, the Enclave grew. Not in size, but in trust. Humans didn't recruit. They didn't preach. They simply lived their values, and others chose to join. A former Cathari medic, disillusioned by corporate health care, now ran a free clinic. A Velnari artist painted murals on bulkheads, blending her people's geometry with human emotion. Even machines changed. Human-AI hybrids learned to adapt, to improvise, to care in ways pure logic never could. Daniel Brooks walked through the greenhouse again, this time with the Sarni child beside him. The boy pointed at a tomato red and ripe. "Can I?" "Go ahead," Daniel said. The boy bit into it, juice running down his chin. His eyes widened. "It tastes like..." "Son," Daniel smiled. "That's the point." Far away on a conquered surveillance outpost, a technician watched a feed from a long-range scanner. The image showed the Enclave, not armed, not aggressive, just alive. Bright lights, moving shuttles, green patches on metal walls. He turned to his partner. "They're not coming back, are they?" His partner shook his head. "Not unless we ask. And mean it." Back in the Enclave, Maya stood on the command deck, reviewing sensor logs. A new signal blinked on the edge of range. Kithari design, but no Conquered ID. She zoomed in. It was a scout ship, watching, not attacking, just observing. She didn't alert defenses. She didn't hide. She opened a general frequency and sent a simple message. "If you're lost, you're welcome. If you're curious, we understand. If you're here to talk, we're listening." Then she turned off the comm and went to check on the new arrivals. The galaxy had thought humanity would vanish into silence. Instead, they filled the silence with kindness. And kindness, it turned out, was harder to ignore than war. The Conquered had exiled a species they didn't understand. Now they were beginning to see what they'd cast out. Not a threat, but a mirror. And in that reflection, they saw their own lack. No one spoke of war yet. But the ground was shifting. Not with explosions, but with seeds taking root in unexpected places. And somewhere, in the quiet hum of 1,000 small acts of decency, the echo grew louder. Part 4. The Vorath came without warning. They had been dormant for centuries, sleeping in the cold void beyond the galactic rim. A hive mind species, vast and ancient, they consumed not just matter, but data, memory, even thought. Their ships were not built. They grew black and organic, swallowing stars whole. The last time they stirred, humanity was still new to the stars. Back then, humans had held them off at the edge of the Orion Spur. Not with superior weapons, but with chaos. They flooded Vorath sensors with nonsense signals, launched drones that mimicked dying stars, and used gravity wells like slingshots to fling debris into their paths. The Conquered had called it reckless, but it worked. Now the Vorath returned, stronger, hungrier. The first Concord fleet met them near the Helios Drift. It was a full battle group. Kethari dreadnoughts, Velnari cruisers, support from 6 allied species. They followed protocol, form ranks, lock targeting, fire in sequence. The Vorath did not fight back in kind. They simply absorbed the attacks, their ships shifting shape, healing as they moved. Then in one silent pulse, they released a wave of neural static. Every pilot in the Conquered fleet froze. Not dead, worse. Their minds were blank, empty like shells. The ships drifted lifeless. Panic spread through the Conquered. Emergency councils met. War plans were dusted off. But nothing in their archives worked. The Vorath ignored logic. They fed on order. The more predictable the enemy, the easier they consumed them. On Elira, Nathan Cole stood in the war room, watching the live feed of another fleet being swallowed by darkness. "We tried this before," he said, voice low. "It didn't work then." "It won't work now," a general snapped. "What do you suggest? Surrender?" "No," Cole said. "Ask for help." Silence fell. Everyone knew who he meant. Far away on the edge of the Perseus arm, the Enclave saw the distress calls too. Maya Ruiz stood on the command deck, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the star map. Red markers bloomed like wounds across the outer sectors. "They're heading this way," Leo Grant said, stepping beside her. "Not fast, but steady." Maya didn't answer right away. She thought of the children in the schoolroom, the refugees in the med bay, the gardens growing under artificial suns. This wasn't just about survival. It was about protecting what they'd built. "Sound general alert," she said. "All hands. Non-combatants to inner shelters. Engineers to defense stations. Medics prep for mass casualties." Then she added, "Open all comms. Broadcast on every neutral channel. Tell them we're ready." The Enclave did not have a navy, but it had ingenuity. Old freighters were fitted with signal jammers built from kitchen microwaves and radio parts. Mining drones were reprogrammed to carry EMP charges. Habitat rings spun faster, creating artificial gravity lenses that bent light and warped sensor readings. Leo's fusion lattices powered shields that flickered like candle flames, unstable, but impossible to predict. When the first Vorath scout ship appeared on the edge of their system, it found not a fleet but a maze. Human ships did not line up. They scattered. Some flew in spirals. Others played music over open channels, jazz, rock, old Earthfolk songs, flooding the Vorath with emotional noise they couldn't process. A small shuttle piloted by Helen released thousands of reflective balloons that scattered starlight into blinding patterns. The Vorath hesitated. For the first time in millennia, they faced something they could not understand. Then came the traps. Gravity lenses bent space just enough to misdirect Vorath weapons. Decoy signals made empty asteroids look like command centers, and when a Vorath vessel tried to latch onto a human habitat, it found the outer hull coated in a biogel developed by Priya Sharma, a substance that confused their organic sensors, making them think they were touching nothing at all. The Vorath recoiled, not in pain, but in confusion. Their hive mind stuttered. Without clear patterns to consume, they faltered. Back in conquered space, the Council watched in stunned silence as sensor logs showed the Vorath retreating from the Enclave. Not destroyed, not defeated, but driven off, by chaos, by noise, by things that made no sense. They used no heavy weapons, Trellis whispered, reviewing the data. Just tricks? Not tricks, Nesivor corrected. Creativity. On the Enclave, the battle was over in hours. No human ships were lost. A few were damaged, but crews were already patching them with spare parts and duct tape. In the med bay, Priya treated minor radiation burns. In the mess hall, Mira handed out hot soup to tired pilots. Maya stood alone on the observation deck, watching the last Vorath ship vanish into the dark. She felt no triumph, only relief. And sadness, because she knew this wasn't the end. The Vorath would return, and next time they might adapt. But for now they had bought time. Word spread faster than ever. Neutral stations buzzed with the news. Humans had done what the mighty Concord could not. Not with force, but with cleverness. With heart, a Cathari freighter arrived at the Enclave 2 days later. No weapons, no demands. Just a message from Ambassador Nesivor. We see you now. Maya read it, then handed it to Daniel. He looked at the words for a long time before saying, "They still don't understand. We're not asking to be seen. We're asking to be equals." Still, the message mattered. In the days that followed, more ships came. Not conquered warships, but civilian vessels. Scientists, doctors, engineers, seeking to learn, to help, to stand together. The Vorath had shown the galaxy one truth. Order alone could not save them. Sometimes survival needed messiness, needed feeling, needed humans. And out there in the quiet aftermath of battle, the echo grew not from absence but from action. From the hum of 1,000 small choices to protect, to care, to fight not with hate, but with hope. The Concord had once feared human unpredictability. Now they realized it was the only thing that could save them all. Part 5. The delegation arrived on a calm morning, their ship painted in the soft blues and grays of the conquered peace envoy. No weapons, no armor, just 3 beings, a Velnari elder named Trellis, a Cathari diplomat named Nesivor, and a young Grelix observer who had once been healed by human hands. They stepped onto the docking ring of the Enclave with no fanfare, no guards, no demands. Just open palms. Maya Ruiz met them alone. She wore no uniform, just a simple jacket and boots worn from work. She offered them water, real water from a canteen, not synth. They accepted in silence. Inside the main habitat, the Enclave went about its day. Children laughed in the schoolroom. Engineers argued over a broken generator. In the greenhouse, Daniel Brooks showed the Grelix child how to prune tomato vines. Life did not stop for politics. Trellis looked around, his pale eyes taking in every detail. The hand-painted signs, the mismatched furniture, the way humans nodded to strangers like they were family. "You built this in less than a year," he said. "We had help," Maya replied. Nessa stepped forward. "We came to ask for more." Maya didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just waited. "The Vorath are regrouping," Nessa said. "Our fleets are broken. Our people are afraid. and we tried to fight with logic. It failed. We need something else. You need us, Daniel said, joining them. He wiped his hands on his pants. But not as servants. Not as subjects. Never again, Trellis said, and for the first time his voice held shame. We were wrong. Not just about your methods, but about your worth. You left quietly, but your absence taught us what we lost. Not workers. Not soldiers, neighbors, Maya studied them. She remembered the vote that exiled her people, the silence that followed, the years of being called reckless, emotional, unstable. Now they came asking for the very things they once condemned. What do you offer? She asked. Equality, Nessa said. A new charter. No more exile. No more second-class status. A shared council. Shared defense. Shared future. And if we say no, then we face the Vorath alone, Trellis said. And we will likely fall. Daniel looked at Maya. She looked at the children playing nearby. At Leo fixing a solar panel with a wrench and a prayer. At Priya teaching a group of alien medics how to grow antibiotics in soil. This place wasn't just survival. It was proof that kindness could build something stronger than walls. We'll help, Maya said. But not because you asked. Because it's right. The agreement was made not with signatures but with actions. The next week, the first joint task force assembled near the Lyra Rift. Human ships flew beside Cathari cruisers. Velnari navigators shared charts with human pilots. At first it was awkward. The conquered followed strict formations. Humans scattered, improvised, talked over comms like friends. But slowly, they learned each other's rhythms. A Cathari engineer watched as Leo rerouted power during a drill using a system that shouldn't work. It did. A Velnari medic saw Priya calm a wounded soldier not with drugs, but with a story. The soldier slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. Trust grew not in meetings, but in moments. Back on Lyra, the old exile decree was erased from every archive. In its place, a new symbol appeared on public screens. A circle made of many lines, human and alien, woven together. Schools began teaching human history, not as a cautionary tale, but as a lesson in resilience. The Vorath returned as expected. But this time, the defense was different. Concord ships held the line with precision. Human ships danced around them, flooding the battlefield with noise, light, and chaos. Gravity lenses bent space. Fake signals lured Vorath into asteroid fields. And when the hive mind tried to consume order, it found only beautiful, unpredictable mess. The Vorath retreated again. This time, they did not come back. After the battle, the delegation stayed. Not as guests, but as partners. Trellis helped rebuild a school. Nessa worked with Maya to draft the new alliance charter. The young Grelk's observer never left. He became a teacher, sharing his people's songs with human children. One evening, Daniel stood with Maya on the outer ring, watching stars. They think we won because of tricks, she said. No, he replied. We won because we never stopped caring, she nodded. The real victory wasn't in repelling an enemy. It was in changing a galaxy's heart. Years later, historians would call it the quiet turning. Not a war, not a revolution, but a shift. The moment the galaxy realized that strength wasn't just in power, but in compassion, that logic needed feeling to be wise. That humans weren't broken because they cried or laughed or hoped too much. They were whole because of it. The echo of their leaving never faded. It became a song, a lesson, a promise. And in classrooms, on ships, in gardens grown on metal bones, new voices whispered the same truth. We are stronger together, not because we are the same, but because we choose to listen.